I sat there, staring at the photo album I had meticulously put together over the past 3 weeks, now discarded on the table like a worthless object. James, my husband, had shoved it aside without even glancing at it for more than 3 seconds. Useless? His voice was curt, dripping with contempt. I felt my chest tighten. What? James crossed his arms, shaking his head as if I had just handed him a child's toy. Do you really think this means anything to me? An album full of pictures and sentimental nonsense? Is this the best you could come up with? I clenched my hands in my lap, struggling to contain the wave of pain rising inside me. I spent so much time making this. These are our memories. The moments we shared. I thought you would appreciate that. James let out a cold, mocking laugh. Appreciate what? This cheesy stuff? Madison, I'm tired of all this romantic nonsense. You should have given me something with real value, not a pile of meaningless pictures. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. James, what are you saying? Do you really not understand what I was trying to do? He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his dark brown hair before turning to me with an exasperated look. No, Madison, you're the one who doesn't understand. This relationship doesn't mean anything to me anymore. He leaned back, his tone almost smug. I've met someone else. She's young, exciting, and she doesn't drown me in all this sappy romance. My whole body went rigid. His words hit me like a punch to the chest, but I refused to break in front of him. So this is how you choose to tell me? After all these years, this is how you end it? My voice shook, but it didn't crack. James shrugged, showing not even a hint of remorse. Whatever, you would have found out eventually. I deserve more than this, Madison. I can't stay with someone who's all about feelings and doesn't have a practical bone in her body. I remained silent for a few seconds, letting his words settle in my mind. Then, instead of reacting the way he expected, anger, heartbreak, begging, I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, free of bitterness or pretense, so real that James frowned. What's so funny? He looked at me with suspicion. I stood up, gently picking up the album. You really have no idea what you just threw away, do you? I flipped to the last page, pulling out a carefully folded document. James squinted at me. What are you talking about? I unfolded the paper and held it up in front of him. Here, the deed to a $2 million vacation home that I bought. My voice was calm, but inside a deep ache lingered. I was planning to surprise you tonight, a gift for us to enjoy together. But it looks like that no longer matters. I smiled, sliding the document into my purse as he stood there, frozen, as if realizing he had just lost the most valuable thing in his life. James's face paled instantly. You? You bought a house? I nodded. Yes. While you were busy chasing fun with some younger woman, I was planning for our future. I thought we wanted the same things, but I guess I was wrong. James opened his mouth as if to argue, but then hesitated. His gaze drifted to the album on the table, as if trying to process how he had let all of this slip through his fingers. Madison, you're overreacting. His voice wavered slightly, but I could hear the panic beneath it. This doesn't change anything. Amanda and I raised a hand, cutting him off. James, I don't care. I shook my head, my voice steady but firm. You can go be with Amanda, enjoy your exciting life. As for me, I'm going to live mine, without you in it. I turned away, leaving the living room and walking into the bedroom we once shared. Behind me, James remained frozen, muttering useless justifications. I opened the closet, pulled out a small suitcase and started packing. With each neatly folded shirt, I felt a little lighter. The years I had spent trying to please a man who never truly valued me were finally coming to an end. When I walked back into the living room, James was standing near the door, still looking bewildered. Are you really leaving? He asked, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. I nodded, stepping past him without hesitation. Yeah. James scowled. You're acting like a child, Madison. You're going to regret this. I paused at the doorway, glancing back at him one last time. Maybe. But at least I won't regret staying. Then I opened the door and walked out. The cool night air wrapped around me, carrying a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally reclaiming myself. I stepped out of the house, closing the door behind me without looking back. For the first time in years, I felt like I had truly taken control of an important decision, a decision not to please anyone else but to free myself. I drove straight to Vanessa's house, my best friend since college. She was the one person I knew wouldn't judge me or ask unnecessary questions. When I rang the doorbell, Vanessa opened the door almost immediately, her eyes scanning my face before raising an eyebrow. What did James do this time? I let out a long breath. Can I come in? Of course. She stepped aside, letting me in. It took me less than 5 minutes to recount everything. The discarded album, the cruel words, and finally James shamelessly declaring that he had someone else. Vanessa nearly dropped her glass of water when she heard that part. Let me get this straight. He called you useless, then dumped you for a younger woman while you had just bought a vacation home as a surprise for both of you? I nodded, taking a sip of the tea she had just handed me. Vanessa crossed her arms, narrowing her eyes. James is an idiot. I mean, not just heartless, but completely short-sighted. Did he really think he could just toss you aside without consequences? I shrugged, the sting of betrayal beginning to dull. He never imagined I'd leave before he could set the terms. Vanessa smirked. That's exactly why you need to make sure he realizes how stupid he is. I knew she was right, but I had no intention of engaging in a dramatic showdown. I didn't want to get revenge on James in some loud or theatrical way. I wanted him to face the consequences of his own choices, and I knew exactly how to make that happen. 2 days later, James called. I had expected this, but I didn't think he'd call so soon. When I saw his name flashing on my screen, I simply smiled and declined the call. 10 minutes later, a text popped up. Madison, we need to talk. I put my phone down without responding. An hour later, another message arrived. Do you really think you can just leave without an explanation? We've been together for years. I laughed. The irony was almost too much. Just days ago, James had stood in front of me, confidently declaring that I no longer held any value in his life. That evening, as I lounged on Vanessa's couch, my phone buzzed again. A video call. He still hasn't given up? Vanessa asked, leaning back with a glass of wine in her hand. I shook my head and decided to answer this time. James' face appeared on the screen. He didn't look like he'd slept well for the past 2 nights. Madison, what the hell are you doing? He asked, his voice carrying a hint of frustration. I raised an eyebrow. Doing what? You disappeared. You're ignoring my messages, not calling back, not telling me where you are. I shrugged. You left me, James. What did you think I would do? Beg you to come back? James opened his mouth to argue but hesitated. That's not what I meant. He sighed. I've been thinking a lot. Maybe I overreacted. I narrowed my eyes. Overreacted? James ran a hand over his face. Okay, I was wrong. But that doesn't mean everything between us is over. We can talk, figure this out. I let out a soft laugh, but there was no warmth in it. No, James. There's nothing to figure out. You made your choice and now you have to live with it. I saw his jaw tighten. Madison, you're overreacting. This was just a mistake. I held up a hand, cutting him off. Your mistake wasn't what happened that night, James. It was the way you treated me for a long time before that. You thought I would always tolerate your condescension, but you were wrong. His expression shifted from frustration to something closer to panic. Madison, I slowly shook my head. There's nothing left to say. I hung up, leaving James to drown in his own chaos. Vanessa whistled, raising her glass. Flawless execution. I smirked, lifting my glass to clink with hers. I knew from this moment on James would realize that he hadn't just lost me, he had also lost the control he once thought he had, and I would never look back. Leaning back into the couch, I stared at my phone screen after the call ended. James wasn't going to give up easily. I knew him too well. A man as self-important as James couldn't stand the idea of losing something he had once taken for granted. But that was no longer my problem. Vanessa took a sip of her wine, her sharp eyes watching me over the rim of her glass. So, how long do you think it'll take before he tries to win you back? I shrugged. Not long. A week, maybe less. Then let him stew in it. Vanessa smirked, leaning back. I bet by the time he realizes you're no longer there to feed his ego, James will lose his mind. I didn't disagree. But I also had no interest in wasting my time predicting his next move. I had an entire life ahead of me to rebuild. 3 days later, while standing in line at a cafe near my old office, my phone buzzed again. No surprise, James. I didn't answer, but a text followed immediately after. Madison, I know you're angry, but you can't just ignore me like this. I sighed, turning off my screen. But before I could place my order, a familiar voice sounded behind me. Madison? I froze. Slowly turning around, I saw James standing there, wearing the same suit I had once picked out for him, though it looked more disheveled than usual. We need to talk. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his unease. I crossed my arms. There's nothing to talk about. James frowned. I didn't think you'd actually cut me off like this. You won't even answer my texts. I let out a dry chuckle. You made it very clear you didn't need me, James. I'm just helping you make that a reality. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow, unsurprised. Oh, really? James nodded, the sharpness in his gaze fading, replaced by something that almost looked like worry. Amanda isn't who I thought she was. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Let me guess. She doesn't take care of you like I did. She doesn't remind you to schedule your checkups. She doesn't remember what you like to eat. And most importantly, she doesn't have a vacation home to gift you. James's face paled. I smiled. You've figured it out now, haven't you, James? It was never about wanting a partner. You just wanted someone to orbit around you, doing everything for you without asking for anything in return. James opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. Don't bother making excuses, I don't care. Turning on my heel, I walked out of the cafe, leaving James standing there with the expression of a man who had just realized he had lost everything he once thought would always belong to him. That night I returned to Vanessa's apartment, sinking into the couch with a feeling of relief, unlike anything I had felt before. I was right, wasn't I? Vanessa asked, scrolling through her phone. More than right, I laughed. James hit a reality check. She whistled. What did he do? Admitted that Amanda wasn't who he thought she was. Vanessa burst out laughing. Let me guess. She was only interested in the flashy appeal, and once James had nothing worth holding on to, she bailed. I nodded. I had no intention of wasting another second on him. Vanessa tossed a pillow at me. And you don't have to. You've come this far, and I'm damn proud of you. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. 2 weeks later, I received a call from my lawyer. I've reviewed the documents. With the financial records and marital status evidence, Madison, you have a strong advantage in the divorce proceedings. Hearing that, I could only smile. Let's move forward, I replied, my voice calm and unwavering. James once thought I would always stand behind him, waiting for recognition that would never come. But now, I wasn't just stepping out of his shadow. I was building a life of my own, free from any ties to the past. As I signed the final papers ending our marriage, I felt no regret. There was only one overwhelming emotion filling my chest. Freedom. I sat at my desk, looking at the list of missed calls on my phone screen. 16 from James. I sighed, setting my phone down without bothering to check the messages. He still hadn't given up. It had been nearly a month since I walked away from the home we once shared, and James seemed to be unraveling. At first, his texts carried the usual tone, commands, demands, attempts to reassert control. But as I ignored him, his messages became scattered, more desperate. Madison, you can't do this to me. We can fix this. You're being unreasonable and you know it. Please, talk to me. Each message was proof that James had never truly believed I could leave him. But that no longer mattered. I had made my decision. The next day I had a meeting with my lawyer. James is still trying to contact you? Mrs. Carter asked, scrolling through her laptop as she glanced over the file in front of her. I nodded. Calls, texts, he even showed up at a cafe last week looking for me. She frowned. Would you like me to file a restraining order? I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. I just want the divorce finalized as soon as possible. If we can get everything done before he tries any more stunts, I'll feel better. Mrs. Carter nodded, ever the professional. Then, I'll push the process forward. With the assets in your name and the current state of the marriage, you have a strong advantage. I'll have the divorce papers sent to James next week. I smiled, a wave of relief washing over me. Perfect. That evening, I received a message from an unknown number. Madison, this is Amanda. I think we need to talk. I frowned. Amanda? The woman James had left me for. Why was she texting me? A minute later, another message appeared. I was wrong about James. He's not who I thought he was. And I think you should know a few things. I couldn't deny the curiosity stirring inside me, but instead of responding right away, I sent a message to Vanessa. Amanda just texted me she wants to meet. Less than a minute later, Vanessa called. Oh, now this is a plot twist. I smirked. I don't know if I should meet her. Madison, you've already won. James is falling into the hole he dug for himself, and Amanda, I bet she's trying to escape before it's too late. I sat in silence, thinking. Then, out of curiosity, I replied, I'll meet you, Main Street Cafe 3 p.m. tomorrow. Amanda responded almost instantly. Thank you. I'll be there. The next day, when I walked into the cafe, Amanda was already seated, looking far less confident than the last time I had seen her. I pulled out a chair, crossing my arms. So, what do you want to talk about? She sighed, stirring the coffee in front of her. I was wrong about James. He's not who I thought he was. I raised an eyebrow. I know. Amanda let out a short, humorless laugh. You don't have to mock me. I deserve it. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath. James, he can't get over you. He says he regrets everything, that leaving you was the biggest mistake of his life. I shrugged. That's his problem, not mine. Amanda nodded. I know, but you should know that he's not just regretful. He's trying to find a way to get you back. I stared at her. What do you mean? Amanda tightened her grip around her coffee cup. James said he'll do whatever it takes to get back what he lost, and I don't know how far he'll go. A chill ran down my spine. James had never been someone who accepted defeat, but I had never been someone who backed down easily. I stood up, looking at Amanda. Thanks for telling me. She nodded. Be careful. That night, when I returned to Vanessa's apartment, I changed the locks. The next day, I received a message from my lawyer. James has received the divorce papers. He's not happy, but he has no choice but to sign. I set my phone down, a deep sense of relief washing over me. James could regret it, he could try to manipulate the situation, but it was too late. I was gone, and I was never looking back. I walked out of the law office feeling lighter than I had in years. James had signed the papers, and the final steps of the process were being completed. It was over. I was no longer tied to the past. Instead of driving back to Vanessa's apartment like usual, I headed straight to my vacation home, the house I had bought to create happy memories, but which had ultimately become a symbol of my freedom. For the first time, I realized something. I wasn't just living, I was truly enjoying life. A few weeks later, as I was organizing my home library, Vanessa called. Have you had enough of relaxing yet? She asked, her voice teasing. I laughed. What do you mean? I mean, you've spent a month unwinding, but I know you're not someone who can sit still for too long. So what's next? I looked out at the calm lake, considering her question. She was right. I couldn't stay in this quiet retreat forever. I had escaped my past, but now it was time to build my future. I want to start over, I said, determination filling my voice. I want to build something of my own without anyone else's influence. Vanessa sounded intrigued. Do you have an idea? I smiled. I do, and I think it's time to make it happen. A week later, I returned to the city and walked into the office building where I once worked, but this time I wasn't an employee. I was here to meet with a potential investor for my new venture, Madison & Co. Consulting. I had spent countless nights thinking about this. After years in the consulting industry, I had seen too many talented individuals stuck in companies that failed to recognize their worth, just like the way James had once dismissed me. I wanted to create a space where people like me could thrive without needing validation from anyone else. The meeting went better than expected. As I presented my vision, I could see the excitement in the investor's eyes. Madison, I love how you've structured this idea, he said as I finished my presentation. I believe we can work together to bring this to life. I held my breath. You really think so? He nodded, offering an encouraging smile. Not just think so. I believe that with your determination and vision, this company will grow into something remarkable. I stepped out of the building exhilarated. I had done it. I had created my own opportunity. 3 months later, Madison & Co. Consulting officially launched. I rented a small office in the heart of the city and built a small but passionate team. We secured our first project, then the second. Word of our company spread quickly. Soon I was receiving collaboration offers from larger firms that recognized how effective our fresh approach was. One day, while I was working in my office, Vanessa walked in with a bottle of wine in hand. "I think it's time to celebrate," she said, placing the bottle on my desk. I glanced around the office, the space that had once been just an idea in my mind, but was now a reality. I smiled. "You're right." We poured the wine and raised our glasses. "To Madison," Vanessa said, "the woman who proved that no one can stop her from achieving what she deserves." I clinked my glass against hers, pride swelling in my chest. It had taken me years to realize that I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I was no longer the woman who silently endured. Sitting in my office, I absent-mindedly scrolled my phone. A new notification popped up, a message from James. I sighed, setting my phone down without opening it. Ever since I walked away and started my own company, James had been relentless in trying to reach me. Calls I refused to answer, messages I ignored. At first, he tried to act indifferent, using the same familiar tone of someone who still believed he had control. "Madison, we should meet. You know I'm not a bad guy, right?" But when I didn't respond, the messages grew longer, more desperate. I was wrong. "But you can't just shut me out like this." The last time I saw James was 3 weeks ago when I accidentally ran into him at a business event. He looked worn down. His once neatly styled hair was now unkempt and his suit no longer pressed to perfection. When he saw me, James opened his mouth as if to say something, but I simply offered a polite smile and walked away. I was far beyond the days of caring what James thought. One late afternoon, as I was reviewing the latest project list for Madison & Co. Consulting, an unexpected email appeared in my inbox. Speaking invitation for the National Women's Leadership Conference. I frowned, opening the email. "Dear Madison, we have been following your journey and are deeply impressed by how you built your business after overcoming personal challenges. We believe your story could inspire thousands of women seeking the courage to change their lives. We would be honored to have you as the keynote speaker at this year's conference." I leaned back in my chair, reading the email again. They wanted me, a woman who had once been overlooked, cast aside, to stand before hundreds of people and share my story. I picked up my phone and dialed Vanessa. "I just got invited to speak at a conference." She let out an excited squeal. "Are you serious? Where? When?" "At the National Women's Leadership Conference. They want me to share my journey." I heard the creak of a chair on the other end of the line, followed by Vanessa's excited voice. "Madison, you cannot turn this down. You've done something incredible. Now it's time for you to tell that story." I took a deep breath. "I'll do it." The day of the speech arrived faster than I expected. As I stood backstage, peeking through the curtain at the packed auditorium, I felt my heart beat a little faster. I had once been a woman without a voice in my own life, and now, here I was, about to tell the world exactly who I was. The host stepped onto the stage, introducing me with an energetic voice. "And now please welcome to the stage, a woman who has overcome challenges to build her own success, Madison Evans." Applause filled the room as I stepped forward. I took a deep breath, looking out at the hundreds of faces waiting for me to speak. "And then," I began. "A year ago I thought my life revolved around making someone else happy. I lived the way he wanted me to, sacrificed my dreams for him, believing that if I just tried hard enough I would be valued. But then, I realized a simple truth. No one will ever value you if you don't value yourself first." The room fell silent, everyone listening intently. I used to be terrified at the thought of walking away from that marriage. I worried about the future, about the unknown. But the moment I decided to put myself first, everything began to change. I shared my journey from the day I left to rebuilding my career to the moment I realized I was truly free. When I walked out that door, I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I would never go back. And I have never once regretted that decision. I paused, scanning the audience. Today, I'm not here to tell a story about loss. I'm here to tell a story about rebirth. I lost a marriage, but I found myself. I lost someone who never deserved me, but I gained a life that I am proud of. The room erupted into applause. I smiled, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride and gratitude. At last, I had fully stepped out of James' shadow. That evening after the event, I returned to my vacation home. I sat on the wooden chair on my porch, watching the lake reflect the moonlight. My phone buzzed, a new message. I opened it. "James, I watched your speech. Madison, can we talk? I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I deleted the message instantly. James was the past. And me? I was writing my own future. Madison's story isn't just about leaving a toxic marriage. It's a testament to the power of independence and self-worth. She didn't just reclaim herself, she built a better life and a career she's proud of. In reality, so many people stay in unhealthy relationships out of fear of change, but Madison proves that walking away isn't the end, it's the beginning. When we dare to put ourselves first, we don't just survive, we thrive. What do you think about Madison's journey? Do you relate to her decision? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and the lessons that shape us.